All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? This time, you guys sent in a ton of stuff about habits. You know, that thing we all think about how to build the good ones, break the bad ones. It's almost like an obsession for a lot of us. We've got excerpts from Atomic Habits, some personal stories, even some research papers. Quite the mix.
It's like we're trying to hack our own brains, right?
Yeah.
Figure out the code to make ourselves do the things we know we should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. So, Atomic Habits, I think that's a good place to start. One of the things that really hit me early on was that idea of tiny gains and losses.
Oh, the compounding effect.
Right. It's not about some huge overnight transformation. It's the small stuff, day after day. But those small things, over time, they compound. It's like interest.
It really is like investing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We think we need these big dramatic actions, but consistent small contributions, whether it's to your savings account or your skill set,
Mm.
they can become huge EE in the long run. Money, health, relationships, even just knowledge. It's almost scary to think about the power of those tiny daily actions, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it that way. Like, what tiny battles am I fighting right now that are shaping my future self without me even realizing it?
Okay, that got a bit philosophical, but...
No, but it's true. It's like setting the course of your ship, one tiny degree at a time.
And this actually ties into something else Clear talks about,
Hmm.
that plateau of latent potential. You know, that frustrating phase where you're putting in the work, but you don't see any results yet.
And that's where people quit. They think, this isn't working, I'm out of here. But it's like all that effort, it isn't wasted. It's like potential energy building up.
So it's not that nothing's happening, it's just that we can't see it yet.
Right. Like think of an ice cube. You're heating it up, nothing seems to happen for a while, and then bam, 32 degrees, it melts. Habits are similar. Got to keep showing up even when it feels like you're getting nowhere because that breakthrough, it, it might be closer than you think. Okay, that ice cube thing, that's a good image to keep in mind. So we've got small changes, consistency, pushing through that tough initial phase, but then Atomic Habits throws us a curveball. Clear actually argues against goal setting. I gotta admit, that threw me off a bit.
Right. Seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But his point is, goals, they kind of lock happiness into the future. It's like, when I hit X weight, then I'll be happy. Or, when I get that promotion, then I'll feel successful. It creates this all-or-nothing pressure cooker.
Yeah, and it delays gratification, right? Like you're putting off happiness until you reach that far off goal.
And then there's the whole either you did it or you failed thing. Goal achieved, you're a champion. Goal missed, you're a loser. It's a bit harsh, don't you think?
Totally, but what's the alternative then? Just
Right.
give up on ambition entirely.
Not at all. He's all about focusing on systems instead. It's about the process, not just the end point.
Okay, so instead of read 50 books this year, it's read 30 minutes every night.
Exactly. The system creates consistency. And often, you end up hitting the goal anyway, as a side effect.
Hmm.
But you're happier along the way because it's about the daily action, not just the finish line.
Okay, that clicks a bit more. Taking the pressure off, focusing on the doing rather than just the achieving,
Hmm.
which actually, it makes me think of another thing from Atomic Habits, identity-based habits. Does this fit in here?
Oh, absolutely. This is huge GE. Clear argues that your behavior often reflects who you believe you are. We act in line with our self-image.
So, like, if I think I'm a healthy person, I'll make healthy choices. But what if? I don't really feel like that yet.
That's the cool part. It works both ways. Your habits shape your identity, but your identity can also shape your habits.
Yeah.
So start acting as if you're that person, and the habits that support that identity will become easier. Ask yourself, who do I want to be? And then build habits that person would do naturally.
Okay, mind blown a little. But let's get a bit more into the mechanics of this. Atomic Habits talks about this habit loop cue, craving, response, reward. It sounds like a catchy jingle, but
Huh.
is it really that simple?
It is simple, but don't underestimate the power of it. It's this feedback loop in your brain. There's a trigger, the cue, which makes you want something. That's the craving. Then you do the thing, the response, and get that good feeling afterwards, the reward, making you more likely to do it again. It's like a neurological reward pathway.
Ah, okay, I see. So to change a habit, we need to mess with one of those steps. But Clear also says that awareness is key. How do those two things work together?
That's where things get practical. First, got to know your current habits and their triggers. He has this thing called the habit scorecard. It's in the book. It helps you map this out. Once you know your habits, then you can start to tinker with the loop. Want to break a bad one? Make the cue invisible. Make the reward suck. Stuff like that. Want to build a good one? Make the cue obvious. Make the reward awesome.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. Now, here's something that really stood out to me. Lewin's equation. This idea that behavior is a function of the person and their environment. I always thought willpower was everything, but this suggests it's more complex than that.
Willpower is part of it,
Yeah.
for sure, but it's not the whole story. Lewin's equation is a great reminder that we're not just isolated brains making decisions in a vacuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our environment. It has a huge GE impact, often without us even realizing it.
So it's like nature and nurture, but for habits.
Exactly. Like, think about smoking. The cue could be a break at work, being around other smokers, or even just seeing a pack of cigarettes. Those environmental cues, they're powerful.
So if I'm trying to eat healthy, but my kitchen is full of junk food, it's setting me up for failure. It's not just me being weak-willed.
You got it. And the opposite is true, too. Want to read more? Put a book on your bedside table. Want to eat more fruit? Keep a bowl of it out on the counter where you can see it. Make the good choices the easy, obvious option.
Design your space to work for you, not against you. I like that. Okay, environment design is officially going on my to-do list. Now, let's talk about those pesky bad habits. Clear says they're autocatalytic, meaning they create the very feelings that make you repeat them. That sounds a bit ominous.
It is a bit, yeah. They're sneaky, those bad habits. They give you that quick hit of pleasure or relief, while the negative consequences, well, those often come later.
Yeah, like procrastination. Feels good to avoid that task now, but then the stress piles up later.
Exactly. And just relying on willpower to resist. It's exhausting, and usually it fails in the long run. We really do become a product of the environment we're in.
So how do we break free then? Is it all about white-knuckling it and hoping for the best?
There's a better way. He uses this fascinating story about the invention of the cash register to illustrate this point. Before cash registers, employee theft was rampant. The owner of this saloon, he tried everything to stop it. Moral appeals, threats, nothing worked. Then he installs these newfangled cash registers that lock up the cash, making it impossible to steal. Boom. Problem solved almost overnight.
Wait, so he didn't try to change his employees' morals or willpower or anything. He just changed the environment to make the bad habit impossible.
Exactly. Cut it off at the source. Can't snack if there are no snacks in the house.
Right.
It's way more effective than just relying on willpower. And it's empowering because it means you have more control than you think.
Okay, that's actually making me feel hopeful, not defeated. So let's talk about the fun part. Making good habits irresistible. One thing that caught my eye was temptation bundling, pairing something you want to do with something you need to do. I've actually tried this with podcasts and chores, and it kind of works.
Right. It's playing to our natural wiring. We love pleasure. We hate pain. So watch your favorite show only while on the treadmill or listen to that awesome podcast while doing the dishes. Suddenly the chore becomes way more bearable.
And then there are implementation intentions, which that sounds very official, maybe even intimidating.
Don't let the name scare you. It's actually pretty simple. It's just about getting specific. Instead of I'll exercise more, it's I'll run for 30 minutes at 7 a.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the park. You've made the decision in advance, so there's less room for willpower to waffle in the moment.
So it's like pre-commitment, taking the decision-making out of the equation. But how much of this is about our internal motivation versus the external world? I mean, we've been talking a lot about environment already, but is it really that influential?
It's more than you might think. Our surroundings, they impact us way more than we realize, often subconsciously. Like, did you know that food scientists actually manipulate orosensation, how food feels in your mouth, to make it more appealing? That crunch of a chip, the fizz of a soda, it's all engineered.
Okay, now I'm suspicious of everything I eat, but it makes sense. We're responding to those cues without even realizing it. So it's like that study with the London taxi drivers, remember?
Right, right. Their brains actually change because of their work.
The hippocampus, the part that handles spatial memory, it gets bigger as they navigate those crazy London streets. And then when they retire, it shrinks back down.
It's amazing, isn't it? Our brains are incredibly adaptable, and our environment plays a huge role in shaping them. So yeah, environment matters.
Mind blown. Again. Okay, let's talk about dopamine for a bit. I know it's the feel-good chemical, but I'm a bit skeptical. Can I really manipulate that to, say, make myself enjoy doing taxes? Be honest.
You might not love taxes, but you can probably make them more tolerable. The key is, dopamine isn't just released when you experience pleasure. It's also released when you anticipate it.
So even just thinking about a reward can get that dopamine flowing. Interesting.
Yep. So if you associate paying your taxes with, say, a nice cup of coffee afterward, You're kind of tricking your brain into looking forward to it a little bit more.
I like it. It's not about only doing pleasurable things. Life's got its chores, but this is a way to make those chores a little less daunting.
Okay, that's actually pretty useful. Now, we can't ignore the social aspect of all this. We're not just brains in jars. We're influenced by other people. How does that fit into the habit equation? Oh, this is where social influence gets really fascinating. We're wired to imitate, especially those we admire or are close to. Clear talks about three groups: the close, family and friends; the many, our larger community or tribe; and the powerful, those with status and prestige.
So it's like if all your friends are doing keto, you're more likely to do it too, right? Whether keto is actually a good idea or not, that's a separate discussion.
Exactly. It's social proof, but for habits.
So we need to choose our friends wisely then.
It's not about blaming others. It's about being intentional. Want to get fit? Hang out with people who love fitness. Want to read more? Join a book club.
Surround yourself with people who are already living the way you want to live. Okay, that's actually making me rethink my social circle a bit.
And it's not just about who you surround yourself with. It's also about finding habits that align with your natural abilities and interests. Finding your game.
Right. That idea from Atomic Habits really resonated with me. It's like, I'm never going to be a marathon runner. I just don't have that build. But I love to dance. So maybe my fitness habit is dance class, not forcing myself to jog and hating every minute of it.
Exactly. And when you're working with your natural wiring, it's so much easier to stay motivated, to be consistent. It feels less like a chore and more like, well, playing your game.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the Goldilocks rule, this idea of finding that just right level of difficulty.
Okay, I'll admit that one sounded a bit fairy tale-ish to me at first.
Don't dismiss the fairy tale wisdom. This is actually key to long-term engagement. It's not always about finding your passion or waiting for that spark of inspiration. Sometimes it's about, embracing the grind a little bit.
Wait, so now we have to make things hard. I thought we were all about making things easy. I'm getting mixed signals here.
It's not about making things hard. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're challenged enough to stay engaged, but not so overwhelmed that you give up. Think about it. If something's too easy, we get bored. If it's too hard, we get discouraged.
Ah, so it's that middle ground, the Goldilocks zone.
Right. And this applies to learning anything new, not just habits, like learning a new language. You wouldn't jump into Dostoevsky right away. You'd start with simple phrases, then gradually increase the complexity.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about pacing yourself, finding that balance.
And you know what else helps keep things engaging? Variable rewards. Those unpredictable successes, they really amplify cravings. It's part of why slot machines are so addictive.
So instead of rewarding myself with, say, a new book every time I hit a writing milestone, maybe I mix it up a bit, keep my brain guessing.
You got it. It's all about working with your brain, not against it. But even with the perfect challenge and the perfect reward system, there's one fundamental truth that we can't escape. Like, you got to show up consistently. And that's the hard part.
Tell me about it. I am the queen of starting strong and then fizzling out after a few weeks. Is there a hack for that? Some secret formula?
No magic bullet, unfortunately. But Claire has this great quote: "Professionals stick to the schedule. Amateurs let life get in the way." It's about having systems in place that support you, even when you're not feeling it.
So it's about anticipating those moments of weakness and kind of preemptively setting myself up for success.
Exactly. And you know what else can be really helpful? Reflection. It's not enough to just do the habit. You need to step back and evaluate, is it working? Do you need to adjust your approach?
And that's where habit tracking comes in handy, right? Seeing those streaks on a calendar can be really motivating, but it's also about spotting patterns.
Absolutely. Habit tracking gives you data. It's like a feedback loop for your habits. And speaking of feedback loops, remember that habit loop itself? Well, understanding that can help us break bad habits too, which is a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, cliffhanger. I'm definitely ready to hear more about breaking those bad habits. This has already been, well, a roller coaster of insights.
Yes.
From tiny changes to environment design to brain chemistry hacks. It's a lot to process, but in a good way.
It is a lot, but that's kind of the point, right? To give you the tools and the understanding to really take control of your own habits, to shape your own life. And we're just getting started.
I can't wait to see what other gems we uncover.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We left off talking about breaking bad habits. And I'm curious, what are some of the biggest challenges you face when trying to, ditch those unwanted behaviors?
Oh, man, where do I even begin? I think for me, one of the hardest things is staying motivated. Like, I start with all these good intentions, but then life gets in the way and I lose momentum. You know, that initial burst of enthusiasm fades and I'm just left feeling defeated. It's that whole I'll start again on Monday cycle. And let's be real, Monday never actually comes.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. And it actually speaks to this really important principle in Atomic Habits: accountability. It's not just about internal motivation. It's also about creating those external systems that kind of support us when our willpower is weak. Clear gives this great example of Brian Harris, an entrepreneur who actually used a habit contract to lose weight. He had to pay his wife and his trainer if he didn't meet his daily targets.
Wait, seriously, that's intense, but I guess it worked.
It did. And while I'm not saying you need to, empty your bank account every time you clip up, the principle is sound. Having someone to report to, whether it's a friend, family member, a coach, even just an online community, it can provide that extra push to stay committed.
Yeah, it's like having a cheerleader in your corner, but one with the power to, take away your treats if you don't show up. And there are even apps that can help with this now, right?
Oh, tons, like Beeminder or Stick.
Hmm.
They let you set goals and consequences in advance, so you're not relying solely on willpower in the moment. It's like having a virtual accountability partner on call 24/7.
Okay, that's pretty cool, actually. I love the idea of automating those good habits, making it as easy as possible to stay on track. Speaking of making things easier, you know what really stuck with me from the last part? That story about the elite weightlifting coach who said, basically, success boils down to who can handle the boredom of training day after day.
Yeah, it's not always about finding your passion. It's about showing up consistently, even when it feels mundane.
Exactly. Which makes me think, environment design, could that help with the boredom too?
Oh, for sure. It's not just about putting your workout clothes where you can see them. It's about designing your entire environment to make the good habits easier and the bad habits harder. Clear talks about this idea of resetting the room.
Resetting the room. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
It's really simple, actually. It's just taking a few minutes to tidy up and prepare for your next action. So let's say you're done working at your desk. Spend a few minutes putting things away, clearing the clutter, getting it ready for your next work session. It's like hitting the reset button.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's like setting the stage for success. Instead of facing a mountain of mess when I sit down to work, I'm greeted by a clean and organized space.
Right. And you can apply this to any habit. Finish watching TV, put the remote back, straighten the pillows, fold the blankets. It only takes a minute or two, but it makes a huge difference in setting yourself up for success.
I love these little tips and tricks. It's like creating a smooth path for those good habits to flow. Speaking of smooth paths, didn't Clear talk about how companies design their products to be, frictionless?
Oh yeah, they're obsessed with reducing the number of steps or clicks or decisions required to use their products. Like, think about ordering something on Amazon. They want it to be as easy and effortless as possible.
Right, like that one-click ordering option. Dangerous for my bank account, but brilliant from a habit design perspective.
Exactly. It's about removing any obstacles that might prevent you from taking action. And we can use this same principle in our own lives. Want to go for a walk after dinner? Lay out your walking shoes and clothes in advance. Want to drink more water? Keep a full water bottle on your desk.
Make it easy, make it obvious.
Make it frictionless.
I like
Me
this.
too. I'm all about minimizing effort, making it as easy as possible to do the right thing. But even with all the right systems and cues in place, I don't know about you, but I still have those moments where I don't feel like it.
Oh, absolutely. It's those decisive moments, right, where you're choosing between a productive action and, well, let's face it, a less productive one.
Exactly. Do I go for a run or watch Netflix? Do I cook a healthy meal or order takeout? They feel like small choices in the moment,
Yeah,
well, we know they add up.
they really do. And that's where we need to be extra vigilant because our brains are wired to prioritize immediate gratification over those long-term rewards. It takes effort to override that impulse.
So how do we do that? How do we make the long-term reward feel more tempting in the moment?
Yes.
Well, remember temptation bundling.
Oh, right. Pairing something you want to do with something you need to do, it's kind of like bribing yourself, but hey, if it works.
Exactly. And while some people might think that's silly, remember, we're trying to work with our brains, not against them. And our brains love rewards.
Work smarter, not harder. Okay, I'm feeling like I'm getting the hang of this, but I know myself. I'm going to slip up sometimes. I'm human, after all. What happens when those inevitable setbacks occur? How do I get back on track without spiraling into, a shame spiral?
That's such an important question. And honestly, this is one of the most liberating parts of Clear's approach. He emphasizes that setbacks are a normal part of the process.
Okay, that takes the pressure off a bit.
They're not a sign of failure, they're simply feedback.
I love that reframing. But how do I prevent those setbacks from turning into total derailments?
He has this great rule, never miss twice. If you miss one workout, okay, it happens. Don't let it turn into 2 days. Get back on track as quickly as possible.
Don't let that one slip up derail the whole journey.
Exactly. And I think a lot of us, we fall into this all or nothing thinking. It's like, well, I ate one cookie, I might as well eat the whole bag, right?
Wait, tell me about it. It's already ruined. Might as well go all out.
But that's so destructive. It's about being kind to yourself, acknowledging that you're human, and just focusing on getting back on track. One cookie doesn't define you, just like one missed workout doesn't define you. It's about the long game.
Okay, that is reassuring, actually. And it makes me realize all of this is connected, isn't it? It's not just about willpower. It's about environment. It's about systems. It's about understanding my own brain. And it's even about being kind to myself when I mess up.
It's a holistic approach.
It's almost like a whole new way of thinking about, well, everything.
And you know what else is important? Remembering the power of those tiny gains. We talked about this earlier, but it bears repeating. Those small, consistent actions, they really do add up over time, and they create these incredible results.
It's like that analogy with the ship sailing 1 degree off course. Over time, that tiny deviation can lead to a completely different destination. And it works both ways, right? Good habits can lead to those amazing positive outcomes, but bad habits can also lead us astray.
Exactly. So it's about being mindful of those little choices we make each day, recognizing that they are, in fact, shaping our future selves, for better or for worse.
It makes me think of that quote, "You get what you repeat." Our lives really are just the sum of our habits. It's a little daunting, but also kind of empowering.
Right. We have more agency than we think. We have the power to shape our own reality, one habit at a time.
And it's never too late to start.
Never too late.
Hmm.
Whether you're building new habits or breaking old ones, the principles are the same. It's about understanding the science, being intentional with your choices, and having the courage to keep showing up even when it's hard.
This has been, I don't even know how to describe it, eye-opening, life-changing. I feel like we've been given a secret decoder ring for our own behavior.
I like that. A secret decoder ring.
I'm definitely going to keep exploring these ideas, see how I can apply them to my own life. And I'm excited for the final part of our deep dive.
Me too. We'll be back soon to explore the power of reflection and some other key insights that can help us make those habits stick.
Until then, keep experimenting with those habits.
And remember, even small changes can have a big impact over time. We'll see you back here soon for the grand finale.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of habits. I feel like we've been on this amazing journey exploring ourselves, who knew there was so much to learn about these little things we do every day?
It really has been an incredible exploration, hasn't it? And as we wrap things up, one thing that keeps coming back to me is the importance of reflection.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last time, but it really deserves its own spotlight. It's not enough to just set up a system and then forget about it.
Right. We have to be active participants in this whole process, constantly evaluating, refining, making sure things are still working.
But it's all up. Mastery requires that feedback loop, right?
Yeah, exactly. Think about any skill you've ever developed, like playing an instrument or learning a language. It's not just about mindless repetition. It's about paying attention, making adjustments, and constantly striving to improve.
That makes me think about habit tracking, which I know we've mentioned a few times already. It's more than just checking boxes on a calendar. It's about collecting data on your own behavior, becoming a student of yourself.
Yes. It's like being a scientist, conducting an experiment on yourself.
Right. Are you actually seeing progress? Are there certain days or situations where you're more likely to slip up?
Tracking helps you identify those patterns so you can make smarter decisions.
Okay, so habit tracking is like our feedback system for our habits. I like that. But let's talk about slip-ups for a second. We've discussed being kind to ourselves when we mess up, but how do we actually prevent those setbacks from turning into complete derailments?
Well, remember that analogy Clear uses about bending a garden hose to reduce the flow of water? We can actually use a similar strategy when it comes to bad habits.
You mean make them less appealing?
Exactly. You can't always just erase those cravings completely.
Tell me about it. If I could just snap my fingers and suddenly hate chocolate.
Right. But you can make those cravings less alluring.
Okay, but how?
Remember the idea of adding a small, immediate consequence to a bad habit.
Oh, right. Like paying a friend $5 every time I eat a cookie.
Exactly. It's not about punishing yourself. It's just about, tilting the scales a bit, making those undesirable actions just a little bit less appealing.
Okay, I'm seeing how all these pieces fit together, but I want to go back to that idea of identity-based habits for a minute, because that really feels like the key to unlocking lasting change.
It really is the foundation, isn't it? Our habits. They're a reflection of who we believe we are. If we want to change our habits, we need to start by changing those beliefs.
So if I keep telling myself I'm a procrastinator,
You're more likely to keep procrastinating.
but if I start to see myself as someone who takes action, who gets things done,
Then your habits will start to reflect that.
it's like we're writing our own narratives and our habits are the chapters.
I love that analogy. And we have the power to edit and rewrite those chapters as we go.
All right, so we've got the big picture stuff, the reflection, the identity, the mindset. But let's get a bit more practical again. Clear talks about making our habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. Any specific strategies that we haven't touched on yet that you think would be helpful for our listeners?
One that's really effective is habit stacking. It's basically taking advantage of your existing routines by linking a new habit to one you already do.
Oh, right. Like after I brush my teeth, I'll do 5 push-ups, or after I pour my morning coffee, I'll meditate for 1 minute.
Exactly. It's a really simple way to build consistency. And when it comes to making habits attractive, don't underestimate the power of, a little bit of positive association.
That reminds me of that study about hand washing in Pakistan. They dramatically improved hygiene habits just by giving people this premium soap that was really enjoyable to use.
Right. You don't have to suffer through your habits. Find ways to make them more enjoyable, whether it's listening to music while you work out, lighting a candle while you read, or even just treating yourself to, a nice cup of coffee after you finish a task.
It's like we're training our brains to associate the habit with something pleasurable, which makes us want to do it more.
Exactly. And when it comes to making things easier, the 2-minute rule, that's a game changer, especially for those of us who struggle with procrastination.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. The idea is to make that initial action so small, so ridiculously easy that you can't say no.
Right. Instead of, I'm going to write a novel, it's, I'm going to write for 2 minutes.
Instead of I'm going to clean the whole house, it's I'm going to clean for 2 minutes.
You're just lowering the barrier to entry, and then you build momentum from there.
And once you've got that momentum, it's easier to keep going.
And don't forget to celebrate those small wins. It's easy to get caught up in those big, long-term goals, but acknowledging those small victories along the way, that can be incredibly motivating.
Oh, absolutely. Like if my goal is to run a marathon, but right now I'm struggling to run a mile without stopping, well, celebrating that first mile is still huge.
Exactly. It's all about progress, no matter how small. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent.
Oh, and speaking of consistency, I keep thinking about that quote from Atomic Habits about finding a game where the odds are in your favor.
Ah, yes. Aligning your ambitions with your natural ability.
Right. It's like we're much more likely to succeed when we're playing to our strengths, when we're doing things that, come naturally to us.
It's not about denying your limitations. It's about recognizing them and choosing battles you're more likely to win.
So it's not about forcing myself to be someone I'm not.
It's about understanding who you are and finding ways to work with that rather than against it. And I think that's what makes this whole journey so exciting.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover in our deep dive into habits. From tiny gains to environment design to brain chemistry hacks.
We've really explored it all, haven't we?
I hope our listeners are feeling just as inspired as I am to start putting these ideas into action.
Me too. And remember, it's all about taking small, consistent steps.
And finding ways to make the process enjoyable.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. Now that you've learned all about the science of habits, ask yourself this. What's one small change you can make to your environment today that would nudge you in a more positive direction? Could you rearrange your workspace to make it more inviting? Could you put a book on your bedside table? Could you pack a healthy lunch for tomorrow?
Even the tiniest actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. You don't have to do it all at once. Just pick one thing and start there. Remember, one tiny change, repeated consistently, can transform your life in ways you never imagined.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's not about perfection, it's about progress. And with a little bit of knowledge and a lot of effort, we can all create those positive habits that lead to a happier, healthier, more fulfilling life. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.